Today in the EU, why forming the next EU Commission might be harder than expected. The deadline to submit candidates for the next EU Commission is approaching on Friday, but the current slate of names endorsed by member states, both rumored and confirmed, complicates the task for Ursula von der Leyen. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU. Today I'm joined by politics reporter Magnus Lund Nielsen to delve into these challenges that might obstruct the formation of the next EU Commission. Hi, Magnus.
Hi, Giada.
As we're heading towards the end of the summer, the EU institutions are getting back to work, and the next 5 days are particularly important. What does this week's choreography look like?
So, on Friday, we have the deadline for EU member states to submit their names for commissioner candidates, the new 5-year mandate. And if everything goes according to plan, we'd have a new commission sworn in by November 1st. The latest names that are coming in are Italy, Denmark, Portugal, Belgium, and Bulgaria. The last time we talked about commissioners, that was just in the wake of von der Leyen getting re-elected by the European Parliament to yet another mandate. And she was only then just embarking on the journey that we hope that it's going to be ended fairly soon with the last commissioner names coming in.
Magnus, let's look at this potential commission's composition. What does it look like so far, and why has it been deemed controversial?
Yeah, because what really stands out is that at the time of recording, we have 16 men and 6 women listed as prospect EU commissioners, which is very far from the gender parity prerogative that the incumbent EU President Ursula von der Leyen had suggested. What we can tell, like the overall profile of these suggested names are that it's typically politicians, very few are diplomats or specifically experts, suggesting that these names have been proposed as member states have had to take into account domestic political battles rather than sort of the greater European good when suggesting names. And so it's typically more domestic political picks.
Right. So we have 22 profiles already on the table. What are some candidates that stand out?
What really stands out are a few of the names that the listeners to this podcast might recognize. We have a few men, again, that hope to continue their work in the European Commission as they have in the last 5 years. Those are Thierry Breton, the French commissioner, Dombrovskis, and then the Hungarian commissioner Várhelyi. And one thing that also particularly stands out is Hoekstra, the Dutch commissioner candidate, who is from outside the current Dutch government coalition. But this has probably more to do with the fact that the Dutch government has gauged that picking Hoekstra would be their best card in securing a good portfolio for the Netherlands.
Yes, it seems that most member states are trying to secure a handful of portfolios. What are the most wanted ones?
Yeah, so it's also interesting, having followed this over the past couple of weeks, is that any time comes a new commissioner candidate, there's a pretty decent chance that commissioner candidates claim that they would very much like to have, for instance, an economic portfolio. And there are only so many economic portfolios in the incoming commission. So economic portfolios, that's specifically to do with like budget, competition, trade. We expect that the whole issue of European competitiveness, not only internally in the single market, but also European competitiveness on a global scale, is going to be at the forefront in this political mandate. Then Central and Eastern European countries are also often interested in portfolios that have something to do with enlargement, maybe defense. What we expect is that there's going to be a defense commissioner that is more like a defense industry commissioner than an actual commissioner overseeing any European troops, because there aren't any of the sort. And then finally, some Southern European countries have aired interest in getting the new portfolio of the Mediterranean, which has a lot to do with migration specifically.
Right. And when I'm thinking of countries that have made crystal clear what portfolio they want, one, for instance, is Italy, that, however, is still withholding its candidate. Why are countries waiting until the last minute to put a name out there? What is the political strategy behind the move?
Yeah, so I've talked to a few experts on this. I've talked to Alberto Alemano, who is a professor of EU law, and I've talked to Mas Yazzini, who's an analyst at a Copenhagen-based think tank called Europa. And what at least Mads told me is that there might be either two explanations for countries holding out to name their commissioners so late. One could be that you have to balance domestic dynamics, so that is definitely just a difficult game of solitaire to play, right? In order to find the candidate that sort of balances the powers in respective political domestic spheres properly. And then there can also be some tactical thoughts behind it. As Mads mentioned, you give yourself a better hand if you see how the pool of commissioners evolve, and then sort of waiting that out and see then tweaking or maybe your own commissioner pick to accommodate the commissioner pool as it stands might be a strategic smart thing to do. But then on the other hand, you could also say that the countries who were some of the first to suggest a commissioner would maybe also have had the best chance to make a deal with Ursula von der Leyen about, well, if you suggest this name, could we get this commissioner portfolio? We don't know whether there actually have been deals made behind closed doors already. There's a pretty decent chance there have.
Right. For instance, von der Leyen has met already twice the Romanian prime minister, and there have been some rumors or at least some questions about the content of their meeting. However, let's go back to something that you've mentioned before and that has made quite a few headlines, which is the disregard the member states have shown towards the gender parity rule that von der Leyen instituted.
Once again, I will aim for an equal share of men and women at the college table. The new team will get ready for successfully passing.
What can we expect as her response? You know, she instituted this rule. She's always been very adamant about gender equality.
The interesting thing is that the experts I've talked to have quite different views on this. Some hope that we're going to see Ursula von der Leyen try to really gain leverage over the member states by simply just rejecting their picks.
Yes, and this is how Professor Alberto Alemanno commented.
Because unless she has the raw material, meaning a female and a male candidate, she won't be able to actually do a proper allocation of portfolios.
She has received the proposed candidates. She can turn them down before sending them on to the European Parliament for vetting. She doesn't have to just automatically pass them on. So that could be a thing that happened. Other experts I've talked to suggest more that she doesn't hold that much leverage in the end, because she also is very much dependent on member states, also in the coming political mandate. Ursula von der Leyen also kind of owes the member states one, in the sense that they have helped her get re-elected and appoint her for a second term.
Right.
And so she'd probably also want to honor that one way or the other. To be completely honest, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of changes. That's my personal analysis, before the commissioners are passed on to the European Parliament for vetting.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk more about that. We've also seen that if we look at the list of proposed candidates, the commission would constitute a centrist force if most of these candidates were approved, whereas, well, definitely the parliament has shifted to the right after June. So how does the parliament decide on such candidates? What is the process like, and what can we expect from them as well?
On a very basic level, the role of the parliament is to check whether the proposed candidates are fit for the roles. Because what happens now is that, well, she has now compiled this complete list of commissioner names, and then she has to sort of make the puzzle make sense in the way that she has to assign different portfolios to different commissioners. And one thing I should mention here is that although that we, for instance, talked about some specific portfolios before, there is a lot of leeway in labeling these different portfolios. Let's just, in this previous mandate, we've had a portfolio for promoting the European way of life, which is I should say, pretty creative portfolio. And we might see some different creativity going on before the commissioners are passed on to the European Parliament. But on a very basic level, the European Parliament's role is to check whether these commissioner candidates are fit for the role. That is also to say whether these candidates are going to be independent from the government who just proposed them, just nominated them. Because what we have seen in the last mandate is that although on paper commissioners are supposed to be independent of their government and, again, try to serve the greater European good, we have seen, especially the incumbent Hungarian and the Polish commissioner, have been widely rumored to be very closely connected to their respective governments. That's at least according to Alberto Alemanno, who I talked to. So we can only expect, I think, that since the member states have shown, let's say, this disregard to the wishes of Ursula von der Leyen, that's going to be an even bigger issue looking forward to the vetting process in the European Parliament.
Thank you, Magnus. Thank you. I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractivist Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractivist to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. It will really help us spread the word about our work. See you tomorrow! As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.